right, guys, so we are moving on to the next section about purchasing your home. This section talks about all of the costs that go along, not only just like your monthly mortgage payment and escrow like we've been talking about, but there's a lot of other costs that you have to pay when you buy a house. So we're going to look at all of that today. Tomorrow we're going to kind of break down, we're only doing part of the section today. Tomorrow we're going to break down every payment that you make on your house and kind of where all of that money goes. Because just because you make a $1,000 payment on a house doesn't mean $1,000 comes off of how much you're paying, right? So much of it goes to interest, so much of it goes towards your actually paying off your loan. So tomorrow's going to be the breakdown of all that. Today is all the extra costs that goes with buying a house. So first, a whole lot of vocab for you guys. So what will the American dream cost you, right? American dreams to own your own home. So the biggest concern is how much things cost, because you guys know we've looked at how much interest you've paid, right, over the course of a loan. Like, you pay a lot for your house. So you have some kind of different costs that go along with it. You have recurring costs that occur on a regular basis, and this is what we've kind of worked on so far. We've looked at like your mortgage payment, your insurance, your taxes, escrow, all of that, how that all goes together. So you have recurring costs that are every month, but then you also have non-recurring costs, which are just one-time fees, and that's mainly what we're going to look at today. So moving costs is one of them. Obviously, if you have to pay someone to help you move, that's going to cost you something. Or in my case, it cost us food, right? Because we just paid our family and friends food. We just fed them to make them come help us move. But you have other costs, right? Besides just, having people help you move. So when you go to close on your loan, meaning actually finalize everything, sign all your paperwork, like there's a lot of things that you have to pay. So that closing, though, that I keep referring to, is that meeting that is attended by the buyer, the seller, their attorneys, and a representative of the lending institution, so somebody from the bank. The official sale takes place at that meeting. The buyer is responsible for paying closing costs, which we will talk about today. Okay, so you haven't actually bought the house until like you actually go through and you pay closing costs, you have that final meeting, you sign all the paperwork. Okay? You guys ever hear people say that like they have 30 days to close or 30 days to get out before they actually get possession of the house? And that's what that is. It takes time from once you've agreed on a price for the house, for like the bank to go through all the paperwork and all this other stuff to happen before you actually meet together with people, sign all the paperwork, exchange the keys, and get the keys to the house. Okay, so that's at closing. All right, so you have to pay a lot of times earnest money. And it depends on the house and depends on the sellers and whatnot, like if you have to do this. I know that when we bought both of our houses, when we lived in Findlay and then we bought our house in Waterville, we paid earnest money for both of those. Earnest money is just like a good faith deposit. It's money paid to the seller by an interested buyer to show that the buyer is serious about buying the house. So if you go ahead and make an offer on a house, they accept it, you will pay them some earnest money that says, yes, I am going to go ahead and buy this house. Now, let's say you suddenly decide, a week later, you know what, I don't want this house. Any money that you paid them in earnest money, you don't get back. So it's kind of like you saying, here's part of the money I owe you for the house. I promise you I'm going to follow through within 30 days, and we're going to get all this done, and I'm going to buy the house. That way they're not just like taking it off the market for people who might want to buy it because you said you want it, and then you suddenly just back out. Okay, so it's just making sure that, they're going to actually follow through with the sale. You have attorney fees that you need to pay. So obviously a lot of paperwork happens when you're buying a house. So attorney fees just paid to your attorney. He comes to the meeting, he represents you, make sure everything goes smoothly in the house. You also pay origination fees. This fee is money paid to the lending institution for the paperwork that was involved in the loan application process. When you sign your actual mortgage papers, you feel like you're signing your life away. That's what I always say. Like, it'd be easier just to give them my firstborn child than it would be to sit there and sign all of those papers. It's ridiculous how many times you sign things, you put your initials on stuff. Like, you are making sure every last little detail you are responsible for. Okay, but the bank gets a fee for going through all of that paperwork and drawing all that up for you. They charge you for that. You have to pay for the title. The title is the legal claim of the property ownership. It's common practice that before a property changes hands, a title search is conducted. A title search is a procedure used to make sure that the seller does actually hold a title to the property. Okay, the last thing you want to do is go ahead and pay somebody thinking you're buying the house from them, and then they legally don't actually own it. So you do a title search to make sure that they in fact do own the property and have the right to sell it to you. All right, points, which you may or may not pay when you buy a house. Points are extra fees charged by the lending institution for the use of their money. Each point is equivalent to 1% of the loan amount, and then there's two different types of points. The next section after this one that we're going to work on, I think we'll look at probably Thursday, we'll talk all about points, okay? Now there's two types of points that you can pay. There's origination points. Similar to origination fees, they're collected from the buyer as a means of paying for the loan application process. So for you to pay the bank for like doing all the paperwork and all of that, some of them just have like a straightforward fee, and some of them have points, meaning whatever your loan amount is, they will take 1% of that. That's what they're going to charge. Other banks just say, here's a flat fee no matter how much your house is worth, how much you're borrowing from us, this is what you're always going to pay. So it just depends on the type of loan you're getting. And then what we're going to talk about on Thursday mainly is discount points. Points that reduce the interest rate of your loan. They generally lower the interest rate by about 0.25% on a fixed rate mortgage and 0.375% on an adjustable rate. What you're doing there for discount points, and again we'll talk more about on Thursday, is you are actually paying the bank to give you a lower interest rate. Think about a 30-year loan. Can just a slight variation of your interest rate make a huge difference in how much interest you pay over the life? It can make a big difference, and we'll talk about that on Thursday. So some people pay extra money on top, like when they first get the mortgage, in order to get a lower interest rate so that over the course of the loan they actually save money. All right. You also will have to pay prepaid interest, which we're going to learn how to calculate today. Mortgage interest is not paid like rent. So like if you guys are renting an apartment, you pay ahead of time, right? So if I want to live in an apartment, I'm going to pay for, what is this, April? So I will pay for May now. Like you pay ahead of time for before you live in an apartment. But mortgage interest is paid in, it's called arrears. I always think of the word arrears in there, which is like behind you, right? So it's paid behind you. Interest starts accruing or building at the beginning of each month and continues throughout the month. When you make your mortgage payment, you're paying the interest that has built up on the month that just passed. So rent, you're paying ahead of time to live there. Mortgage interest, you are paying what just transpired behind you. So it's a little different. So when you make your mortgage payment, you're paying the interest that's built up. Prepaid interest at closing, remember closing's the meeting we're actually taking purchase of the house. Let's see, is the amount of the mortgage interest due to cover the time from the closing to when the first mortgage payment is due. So you have to pay it in advance for when you're closing. For example, if you close on the 10th day of a 30-day month, you will need to prepay 20 days of interest at closing. So it's just, again, some of those fees. The amount of money you have to pay when you close on a house sometimes is absolutely ridiculous. And we'll look at how much and how ridiculous. And then you also will have to pay transfer tax. That's the fee that's charged for the transfer of the title from the seller to the buyer. So right, you did a title search, you made sure that they actually owned it, but then you have to pay money so that a lawyer can go in and change the title from their name to your name so that it actually shows that you own the property. Everybody got all that vocab memorized? You guys good? Pop quiz, you guys ready? It's a lot. And I'll be honest, I understand it so much better now because I've been through the process twice. You know, I bought a house twice, so I understand what all this is. All right, so computing prepaid interest, which is the first part we're going to look at. So remember, that's the interest from my closing, when I'm actually signing the paperwork and getting the house, until my first mortgage payment is due. You will pay that the very first time. You're going to pay it in advance. It is the amount that you borrowed. You multiply by the interest rate, divide by 365. Why 365? That's how many days are in a year. So I'm finding out how much my interest is per day. That's what you're figuring out. So I'm figuring out how much I pay per day, and then I'm just going to multiply that by how many days need to be paid until the end of the month. All right, so calculate the prepaid interest. If I'm borrowing $79,000, the interest rate is 4.25%, and I'm closing date of October 18th. All right, so let's go ahead and figure all this out. So you take the amount that you borrowed, which was $79,000, We're going to multiply that by my interest rate, so 0.0425, divide by 365. So 79,000 times 0.0425 divided by 365. And I get $9.20. Now this is how much you're paying per day in interest. Okay, per day on interest on this mortgage is $9.20. How many more days are there left till the end of the month? So this is the 18th. October has 31 days. What's 31 minus 18? Thank you. So I'm going to multiply that dollar figure by 13. Now, the biggest mistake students make, you are also calculator dependent, which is totally fine. I would totally use my calculator on this as well. But you know how this answer that I got from here, did I get exactly $9.20? No, right? You have all those digits in your calculator. Do not leave all of those digits and hit times 13. It's wrong. Okay? I need you to round that to the nearest cent, which is $9.20, then multiply by 13, which is $119.60. All right, and if you look on your blue paper, which you guys will be able to use on your test, we have on here your prepaid interest. So I have right on there, amount borrowed times the interest rate divided by 365, and look what I wrote right below there. Yeah, yes, you can. It says right on there, rounded to the nearest cent. I'm trying to help you remember that, but people get, you know, you're using your calculator, so they just start typing and they type it all in at once, and then they get an answer that's slightly off from this. It's because they're not rounding to the nearest cent before they multiply by the days. Okay, so just make sure you round that. All right, number 2, how much will be charged in prepaid interest on a $400,000 loan with an APR of 6% that was closed on December 14th? Okay, so again, we're looking for, we know what they're asking for. They're looking for prepaid interest. So I'm just thinking ahead to the test, right? All right, the question says prepaid interest. I look at my blue paper. What's prepaid interest again? Oh, yeah. Take the amount I borrowed, so $400,000. We multiply by the interest rate, 0.06. Divide by 365. And I'm going to round that to the nearest cent before I do the next step. So it's going to be $65.75. Again, I just found my interest per day. And I'm going to multiply that. This was December 14th. So how many days are in December? So 31 minus 14, 17. All right, so 65.75 times 17. $1,117.75. That's just what you're paying when you go to sign your paperwork in prepaid interest. Now, am I borrowing that money when I get my mortgage? That's out of pocket. Yeah. Now, there are loans out there that allow you to borrow the amount of money you need for closing costs. Okay, so that is an option. And when we bought our first house, we did that. Okay, we did a loan where we could borrow a little extra to cover all of those closing costs because we didn't have all that. When we bought our second house, we just went ahead and paid it. All right, so again, things to keep in mind when you're buying a house. There's a lot of money. That's just prepaid interest. That's not your attorney fees, your origination fees. That's not all the other stuff that goes with that. Then you would not have much. You'd only have, yep. Depends how fast they want to take ownership of their house. But you're right. If you want to save money in closing costs, close at the end of the month. Makes sense. To save $1,100. So just something to think about. All right, number 3. Leah and Josh are buying a $600,000 home. Whew, they make good money. They have been approved for a 7.25% APR mortgage, which is a really high interest rate for a mortgage. They made a 15% down payment and will be closing on September 6th. How much should they expect to pay in prepaid interest at the closing? Now, yeah, you're right. They're closing September 6th. So, question being here, what does that down payment have to do with anything? It actually does have something to do with it. Okay, they're buying a $600,000 house, and you said, what did you say, Neil? The 15%? So let's kind of calculate this. Let's make sure we know where Neil's getting all of that. So down payment, they said was 15%. So 0.15 of the $600,000 house. So 0.15 times 600,000, which is where he's getting the 90,000. So what does that mean? They made a down payment of $90,000. What's that mean? They paid $90,000 right away on the purchase of the house. So the house is $600,000. They had $90,000 that they put towards it. So how much did they actually borrow? $510,000. Right? So the $600,000 house, they paid $90,000 right away. They hadn't saved up. They had a savings. So they actually only borrowed $510,000. So does it make a difference in prepaid interest? Yeah, because your prepaid interest is the amount borrowed times the interest rate divided by 365. Okay, so we need to actually take the 510,000 times their interest rate. So 0.0725 divided by 365. So we get 101.30. Again, that's per day. They close on September 6th. How many days are in September? 30. So how many days do they have to pay prepaid interest for? 24 days. So 101.30 times 24. $2,431.20. $2,400 just in prepaid interest. Stop and think for a minute. That's your interest for not even a whole month. They Yeah. Obviously, they make way more money than most of us will ever dream of having. I mean, a $600,000 house, whew, a lot. All right, number 4. Beth is buying a $67,000 house and has saved 20% for a down payment. I mean, it is customary that you make a 20% down payment. It's customary. But that doesn't mean you have to. There's other loan options out there that you could pay 0% down. You could put 1%, 5%, 10%. I think our mortgage, I think we paid, I was thinking it was 5% we had to have down. So there are different options out there. All right, APR 5.5%, closing on May 12th. How much should she expect to pay in prepaid interest at closing? All right, so again, there is a down payment here that affects how much she actually borrows. So, is this maybe a little more realistic house compared to the last one? For most of us, yeah, that's more realistic. All right, so $67,000, but she did a 20% down payment. So 20% times 67,000. So she made a down payment of $13,400. So the house was $67,000. Subtract your down payment. So she actually only borrowed $53,600. All right. So we have to take 53,600. We multiply by the percent, which is 5.5, so 0.055. Divide by 365. So $8.08 per day. So if you were wondering when I gave you that reference sheet, the the blue paper, why there was calendars on there, do you now see why I put calendars on there? How many days are in May? 31. All right, what's 31 minus 12? 19. So 808 times 19. Look at the difference in your prepaid interest from example 3 to example 4. All right, questions on prepaid interest. So does it make a difference if they made a down payment? Yeah, it does. All right, example 2, the second part here, closing costs. All right, so how do you calculate closing cost? There we go. Closing cost is the cost of the home times the closing percent. So if you look on your blue paper, right, you had prepaid interest on here. Right above there is closing costs. Told you on here it ranges from 2 to 7%, and you ignore down payment. Wait a minute. Why do I ignore the down payment? Yes. Yep. It's the difference there. So prepaid interest is based on how much you actually borrowed, so you have to take into account the down payment. Closing costs is just all of the money that you're going to have to bring when you sign your papers, right? It's all the money like the attorney fees, your origination fees, your prepaid interest, like all of it encompassing, right? So talking about all that money. It has nothing to do with how much you borrowed as much as the cost of the home, okay? So for closing costs, you ignore a down payment. Prepaid interest, you have to take that into consideration because it's the amount you borrowed. This one is the cost of the home. Okay, you guys see the difference? So number 1, Shannon was approved for a $340,000 mortgage. What range of cost might she expect to pay at closing? Closing is between 2 and 7%. So we need to figure out what is 2% of $340,000, what is 7%. She's going to fall somewhere within that range. So we'll just take the $340,000, multiply by 2%. What? So 6,800. That's the low end of what she'll have to bring to closing. And then 340,000 times 7%. 23,800. Now, that is what is customary. Did I pay that much at closing? I did not. My first house that we bought in Findlay, there's like first-time home buyer programs out there that have 0% closing cost or 0% down. So like you can find different types of loans that will make you not pay this much at closing. okay? But on a standard loan, it's going to be anywhere from 2 to 7%. So this house, anywhere from 6,800 to 23,800. Now again, this is everything. So your attorney fees, your origination fees, that prepaid interest, it's all of that stuff in there. Okay, so it's kind of everything totaled somewhere between here and here. When you go to sign your life away, right? All those papers, you're going to have to bring a check for roughly that amount. You guys want to buy a house? It's expensive. But again, there's options out there that you can kind of avoid some of this. All right, number 2, Jason's closing on a $430,000 home. He made a 13% down payment and is borrowing the rest. What is the approximate range of cost that he might expect to pay at closing? Do I need to calculate the down payment? No. If I had asked for prepaid interest, would you calculate it? Yes. I got like 3 of you shaking your head for me. Yes, prepaid interest, you take off the closing, or you take off the down payment, and it's just how much you borrowed. Closing cost is what you're actually buying the house for. Okay, so the fact that there's a down payment and it's asking about closing, then I don't really care. So 430,000, we're going to multiply by 2%, and we're going to multiply by 7%. You're what? Buying a house is like a really great investment. It is. Again, there are options out there that you don't have to spend all this. So I don't want to panic you guys and freak you out from ever buying a house. See, that is another type of option for a house. All right, so this person will expect to pay anywhere from $8,600 to $30,100. A little high on that end. All right, Becky was told that based on the price of her home, her approximate closing cost would range from $4,000 to $14,000. How much was the price of her home? How'd you figure that out? Divide. Right, normally you took the price of the house, whatever that was, right, and you multiplied by like 2%, and that would have been the low end. So how would you solve for x? You just divide. So 4,000 divided by 0.02. It's 200,000. Now what if I had chose the high end of this? Cost of the house times 0.07 equals 14,000. Do I still get the same answer? What's 14,000 divided by 0.07? Still 200,000. Okay. So working it backwards instead of multiplying, you have to divide. All right. Prepaid interest. Do I care about a down payment? Yes. Closing costs. Do I care about a down payment? No. Questions on prepaid interest or closing costs? Again, this is standard. Does not mean that that's what you will do when you actually buy a house. Okay, there's options around all that.